Oh, I thought I heard voices. I see. Oh, good afternoon. It's all right, no need to get up. It's all right, I'm not that high and mighty. I see you've made yourselves comfortable. Oh, very comfortable indeed. I suppose my servants put the chairs out for you. Yes, I see that you are maybe admiring my wonderful place here. It's marvellous, isn't it? Marvellous. Yes, very, very good history to this, and I'm glad you've come along here today. But you can see the wonderful views. I'm not going to bore you with the history of when it was all built. I'm sure there's plenty here that can tell you, and my servants are very prone to talking with the people that visit and so on, so you'll know. But of course, it took me many years to have this built. Thomas Archer, the great architect. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's certainly Chettle House was designed by him, and of course we have Rest House and other property, like the cathedral-like building in Birmingham and so on. Yes, very, very impressive it is. But I'm looking at, is there Mr. Thomas Wadey here by any chance? Thomas Wadey, is he here? No? Excuse me, so you're not a lawyer by any chance, are you? No. Are you a lawyer? Listen, if any of you are lawyers, you tell Thomas Harris that any debts, we will honour them. We always make sure that we pay here. But I'm looking out for Mr. Thomas Wadey. He's not here. You see, Thomas Wadey sent me this letter, and I thought he was going to visit me here today, and I was rather hoping that he would be here, because I have this letter from him, and it's rather a bit insulting, I'd say. But anyway, he's obviously from Dorchester, this Thomas Wadey. And I'm going to share this with you as you're here now and visiting. It says, "Dear Sir, I write this in the knowledge that you represent our county of Dorset in Parliament." Well, that's absolutely true. I have nearly 40 years now, and I have represented Dorchester and around, of course, Dorset and all the areas around. And he says, I'm sure you are well aware that in this year of 1749, it is 100 years since the execution of Charles I, a momentous time in our history. I am aware that our families were not on the same side. Oh dear. However, that is all in the past. Well, let's hope it is. But yes, very true that this year is the anniversary, 100 years since the execution. Now, this is a particular time in our history that is very painful to think about, because my family were very much involved in the English Civil War. As you could imagine here, I'll let you know that I'm a royalist. I hope we don't have any arguments here today. I hope we're all going to be quite peaceable about it. But 1649, my family related back to me some of the terrible things that happened at that time. And many people gathered for the execution, and some of my relatives actually went along to see the execution, which is quite something. It's obviously, executions seem to be rather popular and to go and observe, but this was quite different. This wasn't a hanging, and it was the axe, of course. Now people wonder why we had this terrible civil war, and people went to visit it and see this terrible exhibition, and apparently the king came out onto the balcony, and it was a bitter, frosty January day, January the 30th, 1649, bitter, frosty January day. But the king came out, and it seemed that he had two shirts on, to make sure that he didn't seem to be shivering. And he made a speech, and he said, I go from a corruptible to an incorruptible crown, where no disturbance can be, no disturbance at all. And he laid his head on the block. And moved his hair and moved his clothing so that it would not impede the axe. And with one blow, his head fell clean from his body. And the folk from the crowd had grown as nobody had ever heard before. Now, you may wonder why I talk about this, because around this area, of course, Dorchester was known to be for Parliament. And here, well, I am a royalist, and I was very much for the king, of course. King, yeah. So that certainly was a momentous time. So he's hoping we surely cannot go through such a trauma again. And I agree. Let's hope that we don't have. I mean, what a time in history to have your king. And for 11 years, we did not have a king on the throne. So we were around this area. It was very traumatic for us because, of course, Parliament were imposing fines, and we had to hide. And my dear father, grandfather was involved with it. My father was involved in another conflict later, which I'll talk about later. But so there's civil unrest. There are protests about a number of issues. For instance, manufacturing methods mean that a piece of machinery can take over from a human hand. Well, that is progress, isn't it? I mean, that is industry, but it does seem to be, there is a great deal of civil unrest. People naturally protesting about machinery, but surely that may be the way forward for us to have this machinery in the manufacturing. As you may know, around this area, we have an enormous amount of sheep, and the wool industry is extremely important. Very important indeed, and some of my distant relatives were involved with the wool industry. Very much important around Dorset. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of sheep here. Did you know that? Yeah, many thousands of sheep. Yes, a lot of people are complaining about the excessive taxes that we have imposed. Well, that's the way it is, isn't it? I mean, nothing changes there, does it? I mean, these taxes, yes, I mean, it is quite something, all these taxes that we have to pay for, various taxes on, for instance, malt and like that. And, of course, this is what brings on us to smugglers and so on. But I think he talks about that a bit later. There are also an increasing amounts of severe and barbaric punishments for what can only be described as harmless crimes. In our county alone, there have been severe punishments. Well, of course, we know that. Well, people say, well, surely you shouldn't have any punishment for somebody that steals a sheep, for instance. But what can happen is that if people steal sheep, some violence can be involved with stealing the sheep. And it is maybe regarded as a simple crime of sheep stealing, but yes, certainly severe punishments have been issued for that. Hanging and so on. It is not that I condone crime of any sort. For instance, a woman in Wimborne was publicly flogged for making her own candles. It does seem rather, as she did not have a license to do so. Well, that does seem rather severe, doesn't it? But if there are crimes, people have to face the punishments. I mean, but that does seem rather severe. I agree with him there. Well, of course, she didn't have a license to do so. In my very own town of Dorchester, a notorious sheep stealer was hanged and then put in a gibbet for all to see, and he was left rotting. Yes, grim, I know, I can see from your faces that some of you may think that this was quite severe indeed, but if we do not show, we have to show that the crime is not, it must be, if you commit the crime, this is what happens, as barbaric as it may seem at the time, of course. For instance, women in my very own Dorchester, a sheep was hanged. We said that left rotting. I may add that in a very very, very near my residence, there resided Judge Jeffreys, a man that saw that 74 rebels were executed for their part in the Monmouth Rebellion of 1685. Well, I had mentioned that my grandfather was involved in the English Civil War, and he died in 1655. He was imprisoned and was severely traumatized by it, of course, and died in 1655. And my father was involved in the Monmouth Rebellion of 1685. Now, I don't know if you know much about that, but what happened was that the Duke of Monmouth, an illegitimate child of Charles II, thought that it was a good idea to enter Lyme Regis and come here with an army and try and take over and get the king off the throne, and so he could take over. And a lot of it was known as the Pitchfork Rebellion because many of farmers were involved. And I must say, I do find that a lot of them that were hanged and drawn and quartered was pretty severe, as 74 of them were hung, drawn and quartered and hanged and so on. And also they said that their heads were placed on the town on spikes for all to see. Well, many were deported as well and had to go to overseas and be deported. It is in my opinion that the harsher the punishment, the more there is civil unrest. There are punishments that are not carried out. For instance, a man was stoned to death by a group of townsfolk in Salisbury because he had, some may say, a very close relationship with another gentleman. I don't quite understand what that... Oh, right. I see. Yes. Well, what this fellow is saying is obviously that the people are taking it upon themselves to carry out these punishments themselves. And but you know, it's very hard to enforce all these laws. So when we do actually catch somebody, they are severely punished, obviously. But that is obviously something terrible, really. There is public humiliation for those that have committed the most minor of crimes, like the woman that was from Blandford, that was put in the pillory for stealing a handkerchief. On a grander scale, I would like to know if you are lending or going to lend your voice to many that wish to see the end of slavery, as it is clear that the black men in the plantations who are by unjust force deprived of their liberty and held in slavery, as they have none on earth to appeal to. Well, I don't own any plantations. I don't have any plantations. You can see around here, of course, this wonderful house here. And I was, of course, when I got married to my dear wife, Elizabeth, this was part of the dowry from her father, Sir Anthony Sturt, a wonderful man, good father-in-law, very wealthy, of course. And this is why we had this place built. But so I don't have a plantation, but this subject has come up, and obviously he feels very passionate about it, but the law is the law. I was in my club in London, White's, I don't know if you know it at all, and I was with two gentlemen from White, sitting in White's, and one was just talking, just like this. We must see the end of it. How can people be on ships and not having enough space? How can they be so ill-treated? And another fellow said, well, I don't wish it to end because my manufactory actually makes fancy collars for slaves. And another fellow sitting with it, well, you see, I think a number of round here may have owned plantations, but I wish not to go into that much detail. But he said, yes, of course, why should it end? And he was laughing, and I said, but I don't own, I said exactly the same thing. I do not own a plantation. He said, yes, no, you can't even have a carriage to take you to London for Parliament. I said, no, I ride a horse all the way here to London. I set off at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I go to London on my horse. It's good for the Constitution. I've done it for years. I've been a well, they call me a Tory MP. I think we need to have Tory MPs with the Whigs in power. As you said, the taxes. I think some of us may have benefited a bit from these fellows that do some smuggling. And Walpole himself, who died just a few years ago, he had wine sent up the river. So, yes, in fact, he said later that it's interesting, I suppose he sort of talks about later about romanticizing about smuggling. And my father died when I was only 2 years old. He died in 1691. Of course, I was born in 1689, and he died when I was 2 years old. And I was brought up by a mother who sadly died when I was 15. And my mother and my sister used to tell me a story about a smuggler, and it happened not too far away. As you know, Lyme Regis, all around this area, Dorset, was very famous, and is famous for smuggling. And it told me the story about a smuggler. Now, what do you think those smugglers would bring in? Does anybody know? What would smugglers smuggle? Alcohol? Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry there's no youngsters here to enjoy this tale of smuggling, because they probably would say, oh yes, it's going to be jewels and gold and silver. No, alcohol, tea, quite tea and coffee. So maybe, what's that?
Free traders.
Free trader. Is that what you call them, sir? Is it? Oh, you're one, are you? Is that? Yes, I quite like that terminology, free traders. Yes, very good. So she told me this story of a smuggler. Now, this smuggler lived next door to a customs officer. But this smuggler used to have a donkey. And when he smuggled, the donkey would take all the goods back to his cottage on its own. He knew the way. And he would disguise the donkey with some perhaps bits of wood to make perhaps look that he'd chopped down some wood and disguised it a little bit, and the donkey knew its way back to this cottage next to the customs officer. Well, one day the customs officer happened to have a tub of pears. Now, what do donkeys like? They like sweet things. And this beautiful pears obviously caught the attention of the donkey. And the donkey went next door and started chomping on these pears. And the customs officer had seen this donkey before, but had just thought that it was carrying wood. So he took a closer look. And in this donkey, he found, yes, tea, coffee, and thought, and then saw where the donkey went afterwards and went back. So he thought, right, I'll let the smuggler think that it's all right. And the next time, he followed on his horse. He followed the donkey on his horse from his cottage, and he saw the smuggler loading up all the goodies, the tea and the coffee. And he challenged him. He challenged, and there was a fight, a huge fight that broke out. And unfortunately, the smuggler was wounded so badly, but he had a fight. He had a fight with the customs officer and knocked him out with a rock. And knocked him out. And as he was knocked out, he took the goods from the donkey and put it on the horse and raced back. But he was severely wounded, and he knew he was going to die. But he knew that in Blandford Forum there was a friend of his that lived in a cottage, and he called on him and said, look, I can't drop this coffee and tea at yours. I will go to Chettle. I will go. I know a place there, the crypt in the church, St. Mary's Church. I will hide the tea and coffee and all the other goodies there, and you can find it. And sure enough, that's where he hid it. And then he went back to his cottage further back down, managed to get back, and died. Now, I changed this story for my son, and I said, I don't know if you know here, but there's some tunnels in the grounds here, some mysterious tunnels. So I changed it for my son, William, and I changed it that they would hide it in these tunnels here, Chettle House, these mysterious tunnels. So that was a story that I told him. Oh, my son, William, by the way, he's not here at the moment. He's my 16-year-old son. He's out hunting. Yeah. Anybody like hunting here? Yeah? Yes, oh yes. Yes, plenty of hunting. But gets a bit carried away. He likes hunting owls, and he's very keen on that. Now, I must give you a piece of advice here. Do teach your children how to load a gun and fire it properly, because my son, unfortunately, William, when he was practicing, and he mistook a woman, and actually he shot her, a woman called Goody, and I think she was out foraging in the forest for something, and so it was purely accidental. I did punish him. I said, there's the rascal that did it, and I put him in the cellar, and he didn't have any I just fed him water and bread for a month. But he was still in the cellar trying to hunt bugs and stuff in there, so it was quite something. Yes. So that was the story of the smuggler that I really like to have this story. This fella later, actually, he says that he said, oh yes, I'll go through the other parts of the letters, but he hopes that I'm not going to have a duel with him. I don't think so. I know he's challenging me somewhat, but because there's the other... I don't know if you know the story of myself and the so-called gamekeeper. There was a gamekeeper, and I was on the grounds some years ago, and I didn't know who this fellow was. He looked a bit very roguish, you know. He was certainly a thick-set fellow, looking rather... I'm sure he was a poacher in the past. And I said, well, what are you doing here, sir? And he had 3 dogs with him. So he's clearly... I said, I'm beaten for game, sir. I've got to be here because my lord said that I can come over here. I said, I am the ranger. Oh, I'm the ranger here, you see. Around this, for the whole of Cranbourne Chase, I am the ranger, which means that everybody should come to me to find out, because I'm in charge of all the game here. And it's been passed down to me through generations. And I've been a head ranger here for a long time, as well as being, of course, a Tory MP and going to London. But I am the ranger here. It's it's not too grand a title, but I am in charge. And of course, we have to keep control of the game here and be careful about deer and sheep, and anybody that wants to hunt anything should really, get my permission. And we have to get it well organized. And this fellow, this gamekeeper, so he said, I've never seen a gamekeeper. What is this gamekeeper business? What's that all about? I've never heard of anything of the like before. I'd never seen one before. I thought it was Ranger. He said, my Lord Doddington. He said, I said, you must not be here without my permission. And he had 3, they were beautiful dogs, I must say, pointers, nice black and white colouring, beautiful dogs. But I had to say to him, sir, if I see you here again, I will have to shoot your dogs. Broke my heart, but you have to be tough with them, you see. I had to say that. So, sure enough, when I came back about a week later, I saw in the woods this same fellow, grim-looking chap. So I primed my gun. Takes a bit to do, but I primed it. Put the gunpowder in the end, put the shot in, loaded it. It was a flintlock, so I put the powder in the pan, closed it up, and I went towards him. And there he was again. I said, sir, I did warn you. Now his dogs were drinking from a puddle with their heads together, and I fired my gun, and these dogs were killed. Broke my heart. I don't like shooting dogs, especially those fine dogs, but I did have to keep to my word. The consequence of this was the keeper, clearly not happy about the situation, went back to Lord Doddington and told him what happened. Now, Doddington then said, obviously to him, right, I'm going to challenge Chafin to a duel. The challenge was on. Now, my friend, a good colleague of mine, good chap, good friend of mine, Jacob Banks, he went down to London and went to see Doddington, whose real name was Bub. But his father died when he was quite young, so he changed his name to Doddington. His uncle looked after him, Doddington. And I purchased a sword, a beautiful sword, for this duel, because, as I said to you, I have to carry out my word. I must carry out the word. Because Doddington had challenged me and was clearly upset about this and challenged me to this duel. But when my friend Banks went to see him, who was also a member for Shaftesbury, sadly died when he was in his 30s, a great friend of mine, great friend. He went to Doddington, and Doddington was in a completely different mood and said, no, that's all right, I understand, I appreciate that. And I became friends with Doddington ever afterwards, even though he was a Whig. I'm a Tory. But when we're in Parliament, that's the whole idea, isn't it? We have to try and that's why after the King's execution that we can't afford just one Parliament to take over. And of course, you know that we can't have the Lord Protector again, Cromwell, who also was, he was punished afterwards, and his head was put on a spike as well, wasn't he? When he died himself naturally, but his head was, I think, put on a spike. But certainly the executioner was killed as well. Now, so where did we get to with that? So that's why I think he was a bit worried about me. Now, yeah, Judge Jeffreys, well, he's extremely tough, wasn't he, on people? You've probably heard of him, Judge Jeffreys, yes. But that's what my father was involved with in 1685 rebellion. So I suppose really that we just didn't want anybody that, you see, I must tell you that I was approached for the Jacobite. Have you heard about the Jacobites? Which I was because to try and get the Stuart back into on the throne, get a Stuart back, rather than this House of Hanover. Now, I'm nothing particularly against the Germans at all, but apparently George I, he could hardly speak any English. And George II, well, a bit more. I think he's a bit, and so he's a bit better. But they are more for Hanover than they are for England. But we've not got any Germans in here today. But I mean it peaceably. So yes. For that, yes. Where are we now? Yes. Yes. So we've got that. I mentioned these. He mentions all this because I feel, now this is where he gets down to the nitty-gritty. I feel that these problems are the ones you surely should be addressing. The law is the law, as I said. Slavery, well, if the law changes, many hope that it would, but obviously slavery is helping the economy. I don't give my opinion too much. I was very careful in that club with those gentlemen talking because if you can't have spies around. But I certainly, if the law changes, the law will change. He's talking about, it's talking about there's a great deal of romanticizing about highwaymen, smugglers, and poachers. Well, I suppose so, because I have related that story of the smuggler, and it did seem rather romantic to me, and highwaymen and so on, help taking the money off the rich to give to the poor and so on. I don't know how you feel about taxes and so on. I mean, maybe the gentleman, I won't look at him, but he's the gentleman over there. I think he's probably had a bit of the tax-free stuff, I must say, but he knows who I'm talking about. I won't go into any detail, but there we are. Now this is the bit that gets to me. I believe, sir, that you are more concerned about using your position in Parliament to suit yourself, and that you wish the laws to be changed so that you can sell off part of your estates to pay off huge debts that many people are aware that you have. What is this? I must say that you can see the house here. It is perfect for entertainment. And at the time I had it built, I wanted to have Chettle House built because I wanted not only to show the people of Dorset, and not only the people locally in Dorset, I wanted to show not only this country, but I wanted to show the world that we are leading the way, and it is an example to all. And we mustn't, for instance, the Americas, there's talk of maybe imposing a stamp duty on them, the Americas, but that we're working on that at the moment. But they seem to be, we've got to show them that we mean business when we are obviously controlling America. But what he's possibly referring to is, I have 2 sons and 2 daughters. Now, my dear wife, Elizabeth, the daughter of Anthony Sturt, she had 11 children, and only 4 now survive. Only 4. And in fact, and so I possibly have let my sons, my son, of course, obviously with hunting and so on, but I believe I possibly think he's going to have something to do with the church later. I think he will be something. I think he will, I can see that he's going to follow that path, I believe. But my other son, George, on his 21st birthday was, it has to be said, rather reckless and was keen on gambling. But as I said, and when you play cards or you lose, and he lost a lot, he lost quite an amount indeed, and of course we have to pay. We must show that we must pay for it. But as I say, we've only 2 sons left and 2 daughters, so that's what I think. Now, what he doesn't appreciate is that being a Tory, I don't get paid to do that, I don't get paid. It costs a small fortune. I mean, you have to have a certain standard of living to show people. And of course, with the way trade goes, it comes and it goes, and these things happen. So I think he should appreciate more what I've been through. Yes, it is true that Anthony Sturt's been the same, that there are certain laws that I came across that would enable me to, that could be changed, that I could sell off part of my estates to pay for debts. I found that maybe lawyers could sort that out, but that's only to help many people, I'm sure. Yes, I know, yes, he talks about, yes, it is clear that you have wayward sons. Well, I just feel that I'm a decent father, indeed, that is all, who enjoy hunting innocent creatures. Well, it's all properly managed. Yes, I know my son, as I said, William, he does like to hunt owls, which seems to upset certain people, and different birds and so on, but it's all carefully managed. We do hunting. I see that some of you here say that you probably do fox hunting and so on, which has become more popular than hunting, and deer and so on, but it all has to be managed. So that's why I am the ranger here, so that people don't go too mad and shoot everything in sight or kill everything in sight. They have to be very careful about that, yes. So, oh yes, it talks about the proper training with a gun, and as I say, you must have the proper training. So, and he shot the woman's name. He said, it's obviously the story's got around that the lady was called Goody, that he shot. Goody. I think she was out foraging. She probably shouldn't have been there anyway, but there we are. Your other son has been known to squander the family's worth by gambling to a high degree, and as a result, you are currently being pursued by debt collectors and lawyers. Well, as I say, everything will be paid for. It will be sorted out. So, as I say, I was rather hoping that you weren't here today, any lawyers or pursuing me today. I do not wish to give the impression that I am challenging you to a duel, as I know you are capable of accepting a challenge. Obviously, that story has gone around. It sounds like he is rather putting down the gauntlet, doesn't he, in challenging me? But he's clearly quite a peaceful fellow. No, sir, I merely wish to meet and talk with you man to man in a decent manner, appropriate to two gentlemen of good bearing, which, sir, despite your reckless behaviour, my reckless behaviour, or after all I've done for all these years for Dorset, for nearly 40 years, and despite your reckless behaviour, I know you are, as your father and grandfather and many other generations were, respected to the highest degree. Indeed, I believe my father was, and we have, of course, we've had quite a royal connection here with all this. I don't know how much you know about this area, but of course it has been the hunting ground for royalty, and some of my father met the king and so on. Yes. I would like to meet at Chettle Manor if drop by on April the 6th in the afternoon. I eagerly await your reply. Your obedient and humble servant, Thomas Wadey. Well, maybe I shall try and see if he's turning up somewhere. He's obviously coming around this afternoon. And, well, it's been good to meet you all, and I would hope to have some talk with you at some other time. Thank you very much.